His name is Vin Diesel. He's an actor that's been, at least on screen for the most part, since 1998, with his a big first role that most people remember, an early role, as one of the characters in Saving Private Ryan, a film that I will not be discussing in this video. Instead, I want to be talking about his more cult-heavy films. His films that my mate would pronounce more as Vin Diesel films. Films where he himself seems like something extra. Almost like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, except without the ego. Just a facade of being something more. So in this video, we'll be reviewing 8 films with the star Vin Diesel. Those films, as I have commonly listed on my cellular device, my smartphone if you will, wherever I may have put that list, I do not know. There it is, okay. To begin with, we have, at least in the order I probably watched them, one of these more noteworthy cult films, the start of a franchise of films where he plays the same character, of course. This is the cult classic Pitch Black, followed by the Chronicles of Riddick, and of course in 2013, Riddick. Then we will continue with his other franchise. We have some notable additions, The Fast and the Furious. We will also have Fast 5, which some deem to be the best of the franchise. Of all the times for my neighbours to get home, they choose now. Brilliant. And we will also be having a sneak peek at Tokyo Drift. Possibly, I don't really know, I just watched it because it's fun. Then of course we have a new, fresher release of his from 2020, pre-pandemic. This is Bloodshot. Is it his best? Is it his worst? We will find out. And then, of course, we have Triple X, The Return of Xander Cage, a very egregious film, a very raunchy film. I don't know, it's very action-heavy. It's a Triple X film, but not in the kind of way that you're thinking. And, of course, last but not least, we have The Last Witch Hunter. This will be a trip and a half. I hope you caught the pun there, because I am in a car and it's 28 degrees. It is very hot. So, despite if this shot probably looks terrible, I'm going to keep it. Holy fuck, I'm getting out of this car now. Too hot. So, 2000 was an interesting year. For Vin Diesel in particular, he teamed up with, I believe it was David Frawley. It's an interesting name to pronounce. And they created what became the start of the Riddick franchise. The Chronicles of Riddick, as they would pretty much detail it, just in terms of it being a franchise. Yes, Frawley. Very interesting name. So Vin Diesel plays Richard B. Riddick in Pitch Black. I gave this film 3 out of 5 stars. My quote, "All of you people are so scared of me. Most days I take that as a compliment, but it ain't me you gotta worry about." Nicely, of course, because I watched this with my Arrow Video 4K UHD, nicely, it's what I expected it to be, and in 4K UHD, it just gradually looked better. I love when films play with light, either diegetically, like in this film, or non-diegetically, like in Suspiria from 1977. Vin Diesel is also quite interesting in this film, with a not very original character, but a good performance for such a character. Also, the constantly holy shit this film was made in Australia with Australian actors vibe just made its lower budget seem more appropriate. as I believe most of it was filmed in South Australia. The CGI isn't perfect, obviously dated, but there are some nice effects that, even with CGI, are unique to this film, especially when you look at things from literally Riddick's vision. I'd be down to rewatch it sometime in the future, and I hope to see the sequels eventually also. This was before I had realised that I was going to write a whole entire review and do this a whole video. So I liked it. My mate Guy had mentioned that the films were pretty fun, and I'd been wanting to get the 4K UHD for a while, so I picked it up. What can I say about the plot? Pretty much Riddick is a criminal, and he's been escorted on this ship that also has civilians, and the ship gets hit by a meteor belt, pretty much like a bunch of like small little meteors that go through the ship, destroy a lot of things, and kill some of the people, including the captain. And so some of the main pilot crew are taken out of the ship to fly it and get everyone to safety and whatever. But it just so happens that they are in fact crash landing. And so we follow the remains of the people with a few of the pilots and engineers and a lot of civilians, and of course Riddick, as they go on this desert planet in attempts to find food and water and potentially a way home, or at least a way to the planet that they were going to, which I believe was called New Zion. Very interesting name. Of course, religion does theme quite heavily, very to the point that who is it that's his character? Keith David plays Abu Imam al-Walid. So there's a lot of I believe he's Muslim. But there's a lot of those characters, which is interesting, that given that this is like kind of set more or less in the future, that of course religion is still a thing, like this whole new paradise and whatever. It's an interesting development of a universe. So yeah, general gist of it, they're trying to find escape on a planet until they realize that there are these creatures that only live in the dark. They can only live in the dark. And of course, this escalates to a bad level when they realize that all the humans that were on this planet died on this particular day 22 years earlier. Yeah, kind of a cliche, sure. But why? A solar eclipse. But not from a moon, from another planet. Pretty much a planet that looks like Saturn. And hence, they are hunted in the night by these creatures. Technically at night, it's just in the darkness by these creatures. This pitch black by these creatures. And of course, the one person who can save them, who can guide them to the spaceship to escape, is our boy Riddick. Now look, it's a pretty cheesy B-movie sci-fi film. It's fun. It's got some pretty decent action. It's got some nice, enjoyable characters. It's, cliche kind of stuff. It's a story you've probably seen before. It's just that kind of a world, that kind of an experience. But nevertheless, it's still unique enough. Again, like I said, with its special effects, with Riddick as a character, they almost feel very unique. And that's what makes the film worth watching. Now, what can I say about Vin Diesel? Now, he has been stigmatized as this actor who isn't particularly great, but that's the thing. I've chosen this particular list of films, courtesy of Guy here, because they are what he calls, I'm pretty sure he just terms them as Vin Diesel films. They're like the films that he stars in, where they truly feel like, they're designed for him to be in them. It's not just, let's just get a big A-list actor or a bit list actor, who can be muscle, who can be romantic, all this kind of stuff, and just chuck him in there and whatever. That's why, for example, I didn't do Saving Private Ryan, because he's just there. He's not Vin Diesel that we know of. And this was the first film that kicked that off, of him being something a bit more. He has this suaveness to himself. He has this persona that, of course, he carries on for the next two films. where he's kind of like a know-it-all, but not in the I'm gonna be I know everything. He's kind of like, yeah, I mean, you kind of should have expected that, it's just what it is, He's just kind of got this kind of nonchalance to him, which is just really fun, and he does it really well. He pulls it off really well. Now, of course, he does continue this in the sequel, which I guess I'll just roll right into. In 2006, I believe. I mean, technically, yeah, I could talk about the Chronicles of Riddick Dark Fury, which came out in 2004, which is directed by Peter Chung. He'd done Aeon Flux, I believe, and The Animatrix. Two Animatrix. Interesting. But he'd done Aeon Flux, was it the live-action version? No, it was a animated film from 91. So probably what the live-action one was based on. Cheeky fucker. So, the Chronicles of Riddick Dark Fury, not much to mention. This is just a, escalation of what happens. Bridges the end of Pitch Black to Chronicles of Riddick, just explaining what happened to the surviving characters. Not much to go into. Interesting animation, low budget enough, but obviously it could have been better in certain parts. It kind of feels like it keeps shifting as an animation style. Nevertheless, a fun watch. It's only half an hour, which is pretty nice. Definitely worth watching if you're interested in the whole Riddick franchise. Now, of course, I am going to technically get into spoilers because I'm talking about the sequels, but I'm not going to go specific into detail. Unless my reviews detail something that's specific, I don't really care to talk about much of the details as to what actually happens plot-wise outside of the generic aspects of it all. I will also note that I did watch the director's cuts of all three of these films. So, The Chronicles of Riddick is a 2004 film. I gave it 3.5 stars. My quote, "It's been a long time since I smelled beautiful." To be fair, he's talking about Thandie Newton, and she is, whew. Anyway, this, the space epic I didn't expect it to be, with the sequel that I did expect it to be, in terms of continuation and expanding on character. Chronicles showcases the regular features of a sequel, explain the protagonist's backstory, whilst tying it to a bigger, more destructive picture and an overall universe. Riddick is obviously more showcased in this film, both in title and in screen time, as in the first one, he's more of a side character, which obviously gives him more of a kind of badass feel, because he's the side character, the villain, but not really the villain. Again, he's not who you should be afraid of. So we mostly focus on other human characters, even though they're all human anyway, but other characters as our focus. This isn't a disservice to the overall universe, as that was the logical direction after the ending of Pitch Black. The fun part about this film is that it's consistently moving to an obvious end goal, but its many parts are always new and fresh, not just for itself, but also for its universe, especially in contrast to the previous film. The previous film is very takes its time, very stoic, very, each act is something different, but each act is very secluded, more or less. Act 1, Hunt for Riddick. Act 2, what's happening with this planet and why did everyone die? And then, of course, and then fight creatures, and then Act 3 is run away from creatures in the dark to get to safety. Pretty simple. This one, I can't even detail its act structure. It almost feels like... It feels like every 20 minutes the movie changes and just does something else. And it's, consistently paced. There's a lot of plotting to it. And again, this is just over 2 hours because it is the director's cut. It just keeps going and going and going. But it doesn't feel long. It feels like there is so much happening because there's not just the detailing of what Riddick has been doing for these past couple of years, but also who he is as a character, where he comes from, the characters from the previous film, where are they, all that kind of stuff, expanding upon that, involving the world of the planet that they were going to, and these, kind of evil race that destroy and wipe out civilizations and conquer them, intergalactic civilizations and shit, that all believe in this weird cult religion about death, and that, this is kind of interesting afterlife. So there's this whole big universe that's to it that's like, it's crazy shit, and it's really cool. I like how they went in a direction and stuck with it, but still utilized Riddick as a criminal and almost a superhero, while still knowing its roots and how to utilize an interesting sci-fi take. Overall, this is a fun, visually inventive film that takes the franchise in a new direction, and leaves me wanting more. Also, Thandie Newton is just wow. Also, Judi Dench is just in it, and she's just gold. Like, how and why, but mostly she's kind of perfect for her role, so that's pretty fun. I mean, what can I really say about Riddick? Or Chronicles, as we'll nickname it. So, in terms of, yeah, it's weird. It's very hard to detail it as again, the plot of the film, because it's pretty much Riddick kind of ends up accidentally getting involved in a almost intergalactic war, like and he's pretty much been touted as the hero to save humanity, which isn't exactly not cliche. Again, it's not breaking new ground. It's just kind of having fun with itself, and it's got some great actors in it as well. Again, Thandie Newton, Judi Dench, even Carl Urban, and the guy who plays kind of the evil bad guy. I think he's Colin Foyer. He's in like Vikings, and he's like, I believe it's him. But if it's not, then that really annoys me. But he's like really fun. I don't really think there is much for me to say about the film. It's consistent, it's entertaining, it's fun to watch. You know, it's a good space epic vibe to it. It's definitely very different to the first one, but I still like it. And it does still carry Riddick as the same kind of character. Of course, instead of him being... He's still, you know... Even in this film, he still goes to an intergalactic prison and shit like that. So it's like... It still kind of has its act structure of... The first act is, what the fuck is happening? The second act is, okay, now we're in prison, so we're kind of secluding ourselves on this planet that's like half always on fire and half almost freezing, which is just a great sci-fi thing. And then, like, the third act is just kind of wrap up everything that's going on and just deal with the main villain, who is pretty much just this evil overlord that's been destroying planets and shit. It's just like, what the fuck is going on? What can I say about Vin Diesel? He's honestly pretty much the same. He knows his character well enough that he can do the whole... Because he's in, like, the whole fucking movie. The only other times you're not seeing him is when you're seeing Carl Urban and Thandie Newton. And that's just because they're husband and wife who want to be in control of this whole entire fucking cult religion thing. You know, it's like, okay, so we understand his point of view, we understand Riddick's point of view, even though Riddick is kind of the reluctant hero, which is more or less the point. And it's got an interesting ending to it. It's an interesting film, and definitely worth watching. Like, this is my favorite of the trilogy. But it's just because it's so consistent, and it's not like mind-numbing shit. It's fun, and Riddick is still fun. Like, he's the kind of character who... I don't know how to describe him. Again, like I said, he's kind of like this know-it-all kind of character, but he's just like... He uses that to help him survive and not be a dick about it, you know? And he's also apparently a bit of a swoon for the ladies, so that's just how it is. I know that there's two things that are notable about this film: how Vin Diesel actually taught Judi Dench how to play D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, because Vin Diesel really loves that shit. But also, he got the rights to the franchise by agreeing for Universal to do a cameo in Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. So that's kind of really cool. So he has this, like, hands on this whole franchise that he's leaving the same writer-director to take control of. But unfortunately, because they don't perform very well at the box office, they're not always getting movies made, which is really, really sad, because it's like, for example, the first movie came out in 2000. It's been 21 years since it came out, and there's been 3 movies and 1 short animated film in this whole entire universe, which really sucks. So, of course, let's get into lucky last of this franchise, Riddick, which was meant to be called Chronicles of Riddick and have a different name, which I really think it should have. But I think maybe because this came out in 2013, all these years after this came out 9 years after the second one. It's set 5 years later, but still, it's kind of disappointing. So again, directed by the same guy. This is also a 2 hour and a bit long movie. I think it's like an extra 15 minutes if you watch the director's cut. And what did I say about this movie? I gave this film 3 stars. My quote, "I'll ride it like I stole it." Which, of course, if you go to the IMDb trivia, this is a reference to the Fast and Furious franchise. I'm still doing it again. Maybe I'll turn a different light on. This is a reference to the Fast and Furious franchise. Because that's apparently relevant. Okay, that's not actually doing well for the camera. Anyway, Vin Diesel is so powerful that you forget he is naked in this film for like 5 straight minutes. Fun fact. I did like this film. It's probably better than Pitch Black, but I like the characters more in that film, with the exception of Sackhoff in being fun as hell. Because she's in this film and she's great. I really liked her in Battlestar Galactica, so of course I like her in this. Riddick is the same as he was in that film, but like... Oh, okay, a bit of a spoiler. He kind of becomes the ruler of the death cult by the end of the film, the second film. So I guess that those reigns kind of go to Karl Urban's character. Kind of. They don't really explain it, but it doesn't matter. It's not what's important. So outside of its loose ties to Chronicles, I still very much enjoyed the redirect that this film took. It pretty much is just a flat-out remake of Pitch Black. But the difference is that, well, let's see, there isn't much to say given how similar this is to Pitch Black, with Riddick being a sort of fun villain for the second act of the film, but then he also has a dog creature, so, like, relatable as well. It'll be interesting to see how this Lord of the Rings trilogy, as Diesel himself puts it, ends, if it ever does. A fun and worthwhile franchise so far. I'd love to see more of it, of course. It's a very interesting universe. Obviously they put a lot of time and effort to the ideas of it, but this film is so interestingly structured, because again, it's like Pitch Black, but instead of crash landing with humans, it's Riddick gets thrown on this planet, because the people he was with, from Chronicles, were like, you've been our leader for 5 years, you've done fuck all you've been doing is getting laid this whole time, and so we're going to stab you in the back and kick you out, because their ideology is, whatever you kill, you get the rewards from, like, as in you take what that person already had. Which is interesting. So they pretty much kill off Riddick and throw him onto a planet, thinking that they killed him off. And so he pretty much just hangs out on the planet for like 20-30 minutes, just surviving, and he gets a dog kind of cat creature, and he just survives against these scorpion-like things that live in the water, that the very small abundance of water that is actually there on the planet. And he finds a human base where he pretty much sends out a beacon with using his identification, so knowing that whoever comes for him will be coming for the bounty, because he is, someone that people want to either kill or imprison, because he's a criminal. And so 2 different groups of people show up, one that's more of a professional unit, one that's more of a rogue kind of bandit unit. And the second act is pretty much them working together to catch Riddick, which is pretty fun. That's where the film, I think, really gets going. Like, the first part of it's still really fun, like finding out why Riddick's on this planet and what he's been up to for the past 5 years, even though it's been 9 years for us, realistically. But then just him to hang out on the planet, just chilling with a dog, an alien dog creature, and just kind of fucking around is really fun. And yeah, the middle act, really fun as well. These guys, Riddick killing them off one by one, because obviously all he wants is just to grab one of their ships and get the fuck out of there. And that's really the only reason that they're there. But they realize that too. They're like, yeah, we know why you want us to be here, but we're also going to try and get something out of it as well. And so he pretty much gives them an ultimatum. It's like, you either, work together and catch me, or you guys take one of the batteries, because there's like 2 different ships with 2 different batteries. Take a ship and leave, and I'll take the other ship, or we all die. And pretty much it's like, well, how would we all die? And it's like, because there's a storm coming behind them, but he knows that there's something in that storm that they don't know about. And this is where the pitch black essence comes in, where after you've gotten to know and pretty much like and dislike some of the main characters, you know who you want to live, you know who you want to die, that kind of deal. And it ends up colliding with a rainstorm. The rainstorm brings those mud scorpion creatures. What Riddick has realized is that all of them are buried underneath the sand, and whatever, it's one of those things, is like, it, again, just like Pitch Black, where the creatures come out in the pitch black darkness, and they will kill everything that's there that moves, because they can smell it and whatever. And this is the same thing. It's just scorpion creatures instead, and they're really cool. Again, the special effects are really fun. And there's really nothing else to say about Vin Diesel. He's just as good as he's been in the previous 2 films. He feels a lot more fleshed out, like as if he's experienced being the ruler of this other, cult nation. Is just like, kind of like, he's, again, as he says, he's been like civilized and whatever, like he's settled down, and it's like done him bad, so he needs to like become an animal again, which is what he was more like in the first film, and pretty much in the second film as well, of course. And so I like that he gets more to his roots, but of course the answer to the franchise is he wants to go to his home planet, to find out what happened to his species. Well, not his species, but like the people from his home planet. And so yeah, it's really interesting stuff. It's very fun. It can be very dumb for most people. They're just B-movie sci-fis, but they're really fun to watch. Vin Diesel's great, so it's worthwhile. I'd check it out if I was you. If not, then let's move on to another franchise, or just another film, or both. So, we're going to talk about Fast and Furious. No, that is not why I'm in a car. Are you kidding me? What are you talking about? I'm not in a car, you're in a car. The Fast and the Furious is a 2001 film directed by Rob Cohen. It stars Vin Diesel and Paul Walker. Vin Diesel, of course, as Dominic Toretto, and Paul Walker as Brian O'Connor. My quote for my recent rewatch, given how I have previously reviewed these films in my Come and Relax talk about the Fast and Furious films. My quote, "It's not how you stand by your car, it's how you race your car." With my review simply saying, Letty's sunglasses. And just for comparative sake, actually I guess I'll just talk about the first film. Alright, is there really much to talk about the first film? The first film is a film that was made in a strange year. It was made in 2000-2001 period, when the 90s hadn't exactly really ended for more casual films, for more LA-based films. And so, of course, when you get to the end or result of The Fast and the Furious, or even a film like Bring It On, I'm certain that there are a lot more films that aren't stoner comedies in this case, you get to this kind of more ideal aspect of this weird universe where the fashion is very 90s, but the sensibilities are like, it's now the 2000s, baby, we can do something new and fresh. Kind of, it's weird. It's very weird. Anyway. So that aside, what can I talk about this film? Plot, Brian O'Connor becomes friends with Dominic and his mates, the gang, the crew, and they drive cars in street races. And Brian O'Connor's actually secretly a cop, and he's trying to find out who's been stealing shit from truck drivers. Twist, it was Dominic and his gang. Oh, damn, if only Brotherhood had never gotten involved. Nevertheless, what can I say about Mr. Toretto, Mr. Vin Diesel? He has again, and I like to really pronounce this when it comes to Vin Diesel as in his characters, he has this facade about him. Now, he plays pretty much the same character in a lot of films, like, literally pretty much the same character, but in the Fast and Furious films, he plays someone different. He has an objective, he has a motif, he has something about him that he cares about people. He cares about his family and his friends, and mostly they are all involved as his family. This is a theme that, for his character, builds upon the films, especially with his brotherhood-like relationship with Brian O'Connor. Now, of course, he does actually genetically have a sister, and I guess, according to F9, has a brother, but we'll not get into that because I haven't seen that film yet. Neither have you. Nevertheless, he's kind of presented as this big brother type until you realize he's pretty much the big brother of the whole family, you know, once he saw his father get murdered, and by murdered I mean die in a fiery car crash. He's pretty much, you know, had to be in control of his life, and he just kind of had people gravitate towards him because of his personality. Yeah, he's a bit of a thug, and he can be very dangerous to be around, whether with guns or whatever, but for the most part, he's given enough empathy as a character that you don't actually see him do anything violent. He just drives cars fast and furiously, and, you know, all this talk of like, oh, he beat a guy half to death with a wrench and all this kind of shit, you don't see that from his character, at least not in this film. You see it more in Fast 5, when he's against The Rock, because he has to be in more hand-fisted, you know, fight scenes. But outside of that, in the first one, he doesn't really get very antsy. Like, more of the... He's not the antagonist of the film. It's very much a, speed relationship, you know. One character's a cop, the other one's a surfer, in this case he's a driver. And they just kind of bro-hug the whole film. So, yeah. It's a fine film. The Blu-ray version I've watched of it is very loud in the surround sound back speakers. Like, it is really fucking loud, to the point of, it's mostly just sound effects of cars and vroom vrooms and gunshots and whatever, but, you know, to the point where you have to turn your main volume all the way down because of how loud it is. You know, it doesn't matter the fact that the characters are all still very front-heavy, you can still hear them, it's all coherent and whatever, but the rest of it's very loud, which is very annoying. Nevertheless, not much really to say about this film. What can I say about his performance? Yeah, he's fine. Like, again, he takes on this character that's unique enough to this film, but, you know, it's, again, Vin Diesel isn't the kind of actor who will take on roles that are especially new or fantastical. It's usually something you've seen before to some degree. Again, this is more or less the Patrick Swayze type of character, except I don't think Patrick Swayze's character in fuck, I said Speed before, didn't I? I didn't mean Speed, I meant the other one with the surfing. I can't remember the name of it, which is really annoying me. I'll put a poster here. Nevertheless, this movie, which I have seen, don't worry about it. I did my Keanu Fest of movies. You know, I don't think Patrick Swayze's character has a sister, or he just has mates. Nevertheless, he's just that kind of character. He's not as suave or maybe handsome or attractive. Depends on what you kind of... Are you into long-haired, you know, surfer dudes, or are you into bald guys who drive fast cars? Hey, look, Michelle Rodriguez is, so I don't blame you. Gotta love her sunglasses in this film. The whole fashion in this film. Anyway, let's talk about Fast 5, because The Fast and the Furious is an interesting movie. If you don't care much for these movies, you don't care much for these movies. That's kind of pretty much Vin Diesel's way. You might not give a shit for any movie that he's in. They all seem to be mostly popcorn fodder. Even like, you know, Guardians of the Galaxy, which you really wouldn't think of him being in them, but he is Groot. But it's like, you know, and he does perform to some degree in those with the voice acting. So it's like, you know, you wouldn't really think of it as a Vin Diesel film. It's not a Vin Diesel film. I wouldn't consider it a Vin Diesel film. But because it is still, that's more artsy, heart and soul kind of film than just generic popcorn fodder. So, but, you know, some of his films, his have themes and all that kind of stuff, and it's not bad. But yeah, it's mostly the Vin Diesel-esque films are the ones where he's either OP or he's just he's just there and he's just having fun, and it's just fun to watch. And talking about fun to watch, Fast 5 is a 2011 film directed by Justin Lin. Good old Justin Lin. My quote, did he smack that ass or did he grab it? This film is like a tasty treat that you can enjoy with the conventional cinema treats like popcorn and soda. Or in my case, cider and strawberry chocolate Freddo frogs, whilst constantly laughing at Dwayne's sweaty face or Vin Diesel's ultra deep voice that only gets better the more inaudible it is, like when he talks about his father. Though not the best in the franchise, that obviously award goes to Tokyo Drift, but this does lovingly have Han, which is very nice, and 3 amazing heists, which are really fun to watch, and the ability to know when to joke around about the whole street racing origins, but keep in the scantily clad ladies. It knows what it is, and it knows who it's for, and it's only making itself better for it. There's not really much to say about Fast 5. I gave it 3 stars my first viewing because I was binging the whole franchise, and despite the fact that I just watched, if I'm going to talk about the franchise as a whole, which I'm not going to talk about the franchise as a whole, but, you get on a wavelength with it. The first one, it's kind of dumb fun, but it's got an idea to it, it's got a heart and soul to it. The second one, I don't personally care much for. The third one I love. The fourth one is very boring, but it's an idea reboot rather than it's still got some fun stuff to it, but it's very boring. It's very slow and boring and blue, and yeah. But the fifth one really fucking pumps it up. You get some great action scenes. Vin Diesel, again, because he's not the main character, when he shows up, he's great. And it's really fun to watch him in these films. He's more of the macho bigger brother. So, because of course Brian O'Connor by this stage is, definitely more of the adopted brother as it is. But of course he's banging his sister, so it doesn't matter. That kind of sounds even weirder now that I think about it. Anyway, it's the idea of family is really important to him. So, the factor of, hey, we've got to steal all this money from this rich guy in Brazil so we can be free and we can have a happy family living life kind of deal. It's it's nice, he knows what his ideals are. And as a character, again, Vin Diesel is fun to watch in these films. He's not too over the top, which he is more like the XXX films and whatever, which we'll get into, of course. And these ones, it's less about him, so he has a lot less control as to what happens with him and his character. He's more of a, look, you drive fast cars, you float up some women, because in this case, Lady's dead by this stage in the franchise, but she's not actually dead. But she's dead, but she's not actually dead. So he's allowed to flirt up with another woman, but not all the women, but of course they like to eye all the other scantily clad women. That's its own thing. Anyway. Ever been much more like the audience? So, his whole objective is just family. Have you ever heard him talk about his father? Anyway, it's fucking hilarious. Look, this one's fun. It's still dumb fun. It can be hammy with all this kind of shit. I prefer a lot more of the car-related heists and stuff. So hence the first heist where they're actually breaking Dom out of the bus. I love how just Brian O'Connor parks the fucking Charger and the bus just flips over it. It's oh my god. You instantly know, yep, this is dumb fun and it knows what it is. And the second high spin at the train, which is great, and then Vin Diesel comes in out of the light and he's like, I'm here to save your asses. It's great. And then the third heist, which is mostly just the last heist as it is, because it builds up to the final heist, which is really fun. And yeah, Vin Diesel doesn't really do much in the film, you get more of an understanding of the relationship between him and Brian, and it's just nice, he does have this thing with the other girl who I remember Letty's name, but I can't remember this other chick's name, which is really doing my head in. Yeah, so her character is Eleanor Neves, so played by Elsa Pataki, who is a Spanish actress. She's really fun, but yeah, she's the more or less romantic interest in the film for Dom's character that more or less gets developed in the next film anyway, so it doesn't really matter about this one. I still am up in the air as to which one is better, Fast 5 and Furious 6. I think Fast 5 it's the more iconic one in my mind. I remember it a lot more. Nevertheless, look, there's not much to say about Vin Diesel. Again, his character is of Dominic Toretto, this character who now has gained 50 pounds of pure muscle, is pretty much the exact same character from the first film, just with muscle, and has obviously done a lot more criminal stuff. So he's a lot more well-rounded, well-universe. I know a lot more people now. It's not just we're on the streets and just stealing DVDs. Now we're robbing banks and stealing rich cars. It's great. So, yeah, there's not really much I can say about Vin Diesel. He's not bad in these films. He's just fun, And, he can be a decent action star, too, when he goes up against The Rock. So, I don't care much for the hand-to-hand combat, in these films, or the chasing scenes where they're on their feet. It's get in the fucking cars and drive, people. I only care about the car starts, I don't care much about this. The story is interesting enough to watch, but I don't really care, but I care enough, And if your main value is family, then your main value is family. Briefly, I'm going to talk about Tokyo Drift because I watched it last night and even introduced it to my girlfriend. I gave it 3.5 stars, so yeah, I do rate the fifth one higher in terms of the star rating just because its stunts and everything is fucking insane. My quote, life's simple, you make choices and you don't look back. My review was simply, I miss Tokyo. And yes, I can include it because Dominic Toretto does show up in the last 2 minutes of the film, because he's there because of family. That's all I really have to say about it. I showed it to my girlfriend, she enjoyed it. It's the only Fast and Furious film that she's seen. Yeah, so next up we will be talking about The Last Witch Hunter, Triple X, Return of Xander Cage, and Bloodshot. Now I'm going to get out of this car because it's very hot, and there is no open windows. Take 2, I guess. You don't really know that I last night had filmed this whole entire second half of the review, but the audio had really screwed up, so thank God I had an extra night on me. But this time we have the courtesy of Indigo snoring next to the camera. So, let's talk about the last of these films. Of course, I do have my collection. I've got the Fast and Furious box set over there, which has 8 of the films of the franchise. It doesn't have, obviously, Hobbs and Shaw. So you've got Bloodshot with its unique alternate ending. You've got Triple X 3, The Return of Xander Cage. You have Riddick, the extended director's cut. You have the limited edition Chronicles of Riddick slipcover, the comic book variant, which does, of course, fold out to have the theatrical cover. And the 4K UHD of Arrow Video's Pitch Black. But firstly, we will talk about the one that I don't own. We will talk about The Last Witch Hunter, which I watched courtesy of Netflix. The Last Witch Hunter is a 2015 film directed by Breck Eisner. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. My quote, do you know what I'm afraid of? Nothing. Immortal Vin Diesel, who previously looked like a badass Viking despite that whole period not actually set during the Viking era, now hunts witches in the modern day in order to support the rent on his New York penthouse. Whilst not being particularly original for a film, it definitely knows what it is and is written well enough to entertain both competent and incompetent viewers alike. The special effects are pretty rad and effectively used. The story is consistent and energetic and has a good amount of setups and payoffs, from the origins of the narrative to the simplest details of the weather runes. Even the characters are entertaining to watch despite the cliche and predictable twists. Diesel himself is just at his best, badass with the right amount of charm to keep you invested despite his immortal status. Now, I do have a whole entire thing where I pretty much rant about the final act and how poorly written it is, like how kind of, Indy, shut up! God. I'm just going to ignore her. So, it's way too complicated to kind of dissect, and it does spoil the film, so I will say it's a fun film. Like, this is clearly Vin Diesel with his passion for D&D and just making a film out of it, and that's really fun to watch. It's not a perfect film. Again, it's very much a Vin Diesel film. It's probably one of the best of the Vin Diesel films, because it has the perfect amount of special effects and just kind of fun and interesting world building and stuff like that. Like, it has enough intricacies that, without an overdose of exposition, that everything kind of flows really well, from the past of him being, a mortal man and dealing with the Black Plague and the witches and the Black Plague. You having the flashbacks to his daughter and his wife, who of course died because of the plague. And then of course cut into the modern day, where he is a witch hunter. He's known as the last... Well, he's not exactly known as the last witch hunter. He's just known as the witch hunter. I believe his name is Calder, which is a very interesting name. It's not a bad film. Like, the modern day stuff interestingly interweaves the more or less mythos of the witches and how they blend their world with the humans, and more or less how at peace they are. But of course, Vin Diesel's character hunts down the witches who are more, extreme, barbaric, the kinds who want to destroy humanity, or in this case, for the plot of this film, resurrect the witch that he killed in the beginning of the film. The Queen Blood Witch, whatever the hell she's called. So it's got that kind of generic premise of, okay, we got to find out who's trying to resurrect this queen bitch and whatever, and all that fun stuff. You've got your initial, priest character who, is pretty much partnered with the witch hunter. Obviously, every 60 to 70 years there's a new one, because they're, in their 20s to their 80s or whatever, work with him to help him live in the modern world and to adapt to it and whatever, to have new identities and everything and not have to worry about that being a problem. And then there's the aspect of, where he puts these witches, which is pretty much in a prison underneath a church. So it starts after, again, the Middle Ages stuff, with literally just kicking him into the modern day age with on an airplane, and there's a storm brewing, and he goes, a couple rows back and finds a young witch who has accidentally combined these runes together, and because they've been activated with water, have created a storm. They are weather runes, which showcases the minuteness of how some young witches aren't aware of the powers of a lot of things, but also how they are a lot more innocent than you'd presume. They're not all villains, they're not all evil, nasty creatures. And so, he obviously has this thing of, she's scared to death of him, but he's like, no, don't worry about it. I'm only here to protect everyone else because of something that you've accidentally done because of your, not exactly ignorance, but, her lack of knowledge of certain universes. And so, he has this kind of personality to himself where he knows what he is, what he appears to be to these other people, to these witches especially, but he also knows that he can use that to his advantage instead of, just being like, oh, I'm the witch hunter, bang, 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 bang. It's because of his prowess, he's able to get around, he's able to meet people and be able to kind of use that kind of power over them in a way, not as in a threatening, I'm going to kill you if you don't tell me this stuff. It's he still has this charm and charisma to himself because, more or less, his character is practically identical to Riddick, and, dare I say it, Xander Cage. He's just, instead of being the overly criminal version and animalistic version like Riddick is, and instead of being the overly sexualized version like Xander Cage is, he's a bit of an in-between. He has the strength and almost superhero ability of, realistically, both of them, but has the charm and charisma of both of them, but to a lesser extent of one and more extent of another kind of deal. So it's as if Diesel himself has this spectrum of what kind of Vin Diesel character he can play, and it's either he's really macho, or he's pretty much he's really sexualized, and sometimes it's just like a loop. It just connects to itself depending on the film. Sometimes to a certain 20% here and 30% there. Or I don't know. You could probably make a Venn diagram out of it or some kind of bollocks like that, because that's the Vin Diesel role. And so that's why he works so well in this film, because he just has that appetite to himself. And you come to appreciate it and expect it from the majority of his films. So would I suggest The Last Witch Hunter? Yeah, especially as a Vin Diesel film. You can tell that he definitely had a big hand in the concept of it, because it's literally based on a D&D character that he made. And so it's got a fun universe. It's, again, like I said, consistently paced. It has some good characters in it. You've got Michael Caine, you've got Elijah Wood, you've got Rose Leslie as well, who plays a witch/dreamwalker. It does have some predictable twists, but it also has some fun characters and some fun action, fun world building as well. And it's one of those things of, despite his prowess of him kind of obviously being this witch hunter that's immortal, that doesn't mean that danger isn't always around the corner kind of deal. My only criticism really being the end of the film and how they've structured it, whereas the last act, you can feel when the last act comes, because obviously, the evil witches come back to life and all this kind of shit and hurt. The real twist is that his immortality is actually what's keeping her alive to begin with. If he wasn't immortal, or if they had have stabbed her heart to begin with and completely killed her, then he would be dead too. So, or at least wouldn't be immortal. So, of course, that kind of plays into the last act, but also, it's not really the big thing about the last act, because him being immortal and whatever doesn't really matter, because the last act is structured really weirdly. By the time they get to this kind of cave underneath the church, where she's already been resurrected, but she's going to that place because they've obviously put a lot of witches there. They've put a lot of witches there, and of course he's realised that, I've just put all the most powerful witches for the past, 500 years in this one spot. She can use that power to, create an energy field, whatever, to bring on the doom of the end of the universe and whatever. So they grab out the most recent witch, who happens to be the guy from Preacher, the Irish guy, and so he's meant to be the weakest link of it all. So the dream walker goes into his dream to kill him, because if you're in a dream, you can get you can get hurt or die in your dreams. Whatever happens to you in the dream reflects on the real world kind of deal, which is, again, in itself a cliche, but it is what it is. So while that's happening, because they've taken someone out of the prison, it activates the guard to come and, put the person back into the prison. And so Vin Diesel has to fight this big wooden creature, pretty much. So he fights it, and he destroys it. Then it gets back up again, and he fights it again, and he destroys it a second time, this time killing the little creature that actually controls it. And this is where you'd expect to dramatically be cutting between him fighting that creature and the Dreamwalker doing her thing, but instead they say the Dreamwalker goes into the dream, but you don't see it, have the whole entire Vin Diesel fight happen, and then he goes back to her, and then she goes into the dream, and then kills the thing. Actually, I don't even know if it even happens. I think he leaves her in the dream state with the knocked out vampire and the, kind of comatose vampire, sorry, I've been watching Buffy, witch, and the priest, the young priest played by Elijah Wood. So he fucks off to go fight the evil witch, the queen, and so then you get her perspective in the dream, and it's, she goes, fights the witch, whatever, kills him, destroys the link, Again, dramatically, you'd expect this to be happening at the exact same time, but it doesn't. So then he goes off to fight the witch. Almost like he bests her to some degree, but then she knocks him down, and then he gets shot. Surprise, surprise, the twist is another twist, I guess. Elijah Wood's character was actually the son of two witches that Vin Diesel killed. So he was hoping to resurrect the evil queen in order to become a witch that has powers, because he doesn't actually have powers, doesn't he, Indigo? It's like, what's that about? So she, despite being grateful of him, helping her be resurrected, she kills him because he's worthless to her, because she can't give him powers, because that's not how it works. You have to be born with them. So she kills him. Rose Leslie's character is kind of knocked out, so the Queen uses her, because she's a witch, as the final link to re-emerge the apocalypse. Cut to Michael Caine's character in the penthouse looking at, the church, and then all these black things kind of come out of the church. I think they're meant to be, they're bats or flies or insects or something. I don't know. It's a swarm or something. Obviously signaling the end times. And so he's just sitting there going over a glass of brandy, just being like, well, we're f***ed. And so then Vin Diesel wakes up after having this dream vision with his wife and daughter. And he wakes up and realizes that the Queen has taken over, Rose Leslie's Dreamwalker. And she's kind of spawning these creatures from behind her, which is more or less a callback to the start of the film, because she's in this big tree with all these tree witch creatures. It's a fun, a fun fight scene. But instead of him, fighting more creatures and then getting to her and stabbing her in the heart and whatever and cancelling the apocalypse, instead he just picks up his sword, throws it, and stabs her. And that's it. So with all this stuff that specifically seems that it's padded out, so they have a padded out runtime so they can hit that 90-minute mark on the head, instead of having a big fight scene, they just finished it. They just do it. That's it. That's the end of the movie. I should mention that he does activate the runestones, so which you didn't even see him grabs those runestones that he'd put away in his penthouse at the start of the film after the airplane stuff. He throws them into a puddle, they react, creates a storm that distracts her, and then he throws the sword and stabs her. So there is still that element to it of the setup payoff, which is nice, but it also kind of feels like do you think they wrote in that idea because it's like budgetary reasons? Oh, we didn't have the budget for another big fight, so instead we'll have these weather runes set up so we can have this kind of really chaotic beginning of him in the modern age, and then we can have them pay off at the end of the film where he uses them as a distraction, causes a storm, and then stabs her. And then that's the end of the film. Well, there's still an epilogue, but that's the end of the big boss fight. Either way, decent film. Bit of a messy ending, but decent film altogether. Then, of course, we have... I'm not even going to get it out. Hold on. Then we have Triple X 3, The Return of Xander Cage. I gave this film 3 stars, which is a common trend for all these Vin Diesel films. My quote, X looks out for his own. And my review, you either want to fuck Vin Diesel or fuck with Vin Diesel. I had initially watched this film, which is a 2017 film directed by DJ Caruso, who has not directed any good films. I had reviewed this back in 2019, pretty much just saying as dumb and as fun as I expected, which I say in a positive way. So yeah, this film is... It's pretty much exactly what you expect. There's not really much to say about this one. In terms of plot, Xander Cage is actually still alive because this is the third one. He was supposed to have been killed off between films of the first one and the second one, because the second one, the next level, they brought in Ice Cube, and they're like, oh, Xander Cage, our previous spy, died between films, because obviously Vin Diesel didn't want to be in the second one. Or whatever the reason was. Anyway, then, they make the third one. And, oh, look, Xander Cage is actually alive. and he has to stop these bad guys from using a tablet to use satellites to destroy generic plot with spy missions and stuff, but not like spy missions like James Bond or Mission Impossible, but kind of, but also not really, mostly just excuses for action set pieces, and then twists, oh, the bad guys are actually Triple X people, and twist, the bad guy is actually a person who's working with the person who's replaced Samuel L. Jackson, because Samuel L. Jackson dies at the start of the film in a fire explosion. And the replacement is Tony Collette. So then the other white guy is the bad guy, so let's kill him off. Oh, turns out the actual bad guy was Tony Collette all along. Twist again, and she gets the device, and now she wants to destroy the world or whatever. I don't know, who cares. Nevertheless, Xander Cage has to fight them with his new group of people, and there's a big cast of characters. Ice Cube returns. You've got pretty much everyone who was popular in 2017. Who was popular in 2017? Ruby Rose was popular in 2017. Tony Jaa, who plays the most annoying character in this whole entire film, and he makes weird sound effects for some bloody reason, and has a blonde mohawk. He's cool, and they give him the good amount of shots and whatever to do some cool practical stunts, which is fun, unlike most other films that he's in that are American, where they just overcut the fuck out of the films of him in it. Anyway, Rory McCann is in it. He's fun. He was in Hot Fuzz. Donnie Yen is in it. Deepika Padukone, or Padukone, is in this film. She's a Bollywood actress, so I guess she wanted to get into the Hollywood scene. Nina Dobrev is in this. It has a Tony Collette, Samuel L. Jackson, Ice Cube. You got a whole bunch of people in this film. Who's the last? Doesn't actually say. But yeah, so look, this film is dumb fun. It's Vin Diesel with big muscles and wildly bold charisma and apparently shockingly big sex appeal, to the point that literally every woman wants to fuck him. And most do. So hence the review of, unless you want to fuck him, you probably want to fuck with him, and that's pretty much everyone else wants to fight him. And he's an interesting person to fight too, because it's like he mostly tries to outsmart the person rather than using guns all the time or using his fists. So he doesn't seem to be someone he uses brains over brawn, which is very interesting. Nevertheless, he uses his team over himself most of the time as well. But he's cool with his stunts, so that's pretty fun. You know, it's a dumb, explosive film. It's like Fast and Furious, but more centric to Vin Diesel's character, and more of a James Bond-esque version than Dominic Toretto version. So, yeah. Nevertheless, this is the one extreme of his overly masculinized, overly sexualized character versus, like, pretty much Pitch Black's Riddick, where he's just kind of, animalistic and quiet and calculative. So, yeah. They're kind of the polar opposites of each other. So, he has range. Compliment to him, of course. Compliment the chef. And last but not least, we have 2020's pre-pandemic Bloodshot, even though technically it is during the start of the pandemic. This is a Dave Wilson film, and I gave it 1 star. Yeah, no, this is, of all these films, this is the one I kind of really wanted to enjoy the most, with the expectation that The Last Witch Hunter was going to be the one I hated the most. But in fact, no, it's actually, I liked all these films except for Bloodshot. Bloodshot's the only one of these films that I did not like. So let's dive into why I didn't like it. My quote: "I need real friends, or a therapist." See, it's funny because of reasons. I really wanted to like this, but it was so incredibly lackluster and boring once the main twist was revealed. Honestly, the characters sucked. Vin Diesel was boring, somehow. As if his charm died when his character died, the first time around. The villains were boring, both the fake and actual villains, and the overall film was a snooze to get through. The action wasn't interesting, and everything else was so tame and just bland. My main gripe is with the directing, writing, and cinematography. Clearly, Bloodshot is a popular comic, and I even say that without having ever heard of him or it. I've never heard of Bloodshot before, so I can't. I guess it's popular enough to make a movie out of, but so is Tank Girl, so who knows anymore. And yet, we get a generic sci-fi action shitfest, and by sci-fi I just mean, like, tech sci-fi, not, like, space sci-fi. Is that really even sci-fi? I don't know. It's kind of like a sci-fi premise in a way, like Black Mirror-esque. Anyway, the plot is just messy and exists for the sake of runtime and nothing else. There is no tension or character or anything to cling to. The directing is just awful, with some of the worst lines being delivered so horridly that it's clear that the cast knew that this wasn't going to be a hit and just took the paycheck. The cinematography was my absolute least favourite part. Somehow I like the slow-mo crap, which, is usually the thing that, given the past with stuff like Zack Snyder films, you'd expect it to be overdone and just boring. But this film, it was the only thing that was actually fluid and inventive and cohesive. Yet the rest of the film was so jarringly shot that I couldn't understand the geography of most scenes. And that's even to say, during one of the scenes, a big action scene, where two guys are chasing Vin Diesel's character of Bloodshot, apparently they never call him that in the film, and one of the characters, one has robotic legs, so he's chasing him. The other one is blind, so he has robotic eyes implanted into him, pretty much, and so he can connect to satellite imagery and stuff and track for satellites. But even with that level of we can see the whole picture, they edited it and wrote it in such a way that was just, you don't know what the fuck is really going on. It's just a mess. So I just don't get it. It's just a waste of time for everyone involved, including and especially the audience. My 2 half stars go to the opening 10 minutes with the fun Aussie bad guy and he's dancing and the slow motion stuff. That's all that I liked. And literally, as in the bad guy with the opening of the film is Vin Diesel's Bloodshot as he's a army marine in some Middle Eastern country, saves a woman from a guy, whatever, he's a hero, comes back home to his blonde babe of a wife who's that British actress from Doctor Who was in the Silence of the Library, and she's in Westworld as well, so she's great. I love when she's in shit, which is good. And so he ends up on vacation with her getting kidnapped by this Aussie guy, who I'm actually pretty sure is an Aussie guy. He's an actual Aussie actor. And, they're in this cold meat locker, because it's one of those big, long hallway fridges with all these hanging, pigs or whatever. And so it pretty much seems like either the writer or the director or both saw Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs and that particular scene and just recreated that. Just had the music turned on, had the guy in slippers and shorts. I think he's in a t-shirt but then puts on a big woolly jacket because of course he's in, a cold fridge, and just does a dance and kind of sings along to the song, and he has a gun in his hand, but the gun is a cow gun, so there must be cow bodies, I'd say, but the one that you shoot and it has a metal thing that prongs out. So I think it's a bolt gun, I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. And so, yeah, he slightly tortures the wife and then kills her and then shoots Vin Diesel's character in the head. Then boom, he wakes up and now he's completely a robot. And I literally mean that he's made of nanobots. So it's he's an amnesiac, he doesn't know who he is. And now he has to go and, when he finally remembers who the guy is that killed his wife, he hunts him down and kills him. And then the twist is, he was programmed to do that. He may have actually died in combat. That wife is based off his actual wife who he'd split up with because he couldn't commit to leaving the army because despite his, moral of I always come home, he was still too dedicated to the army, so they split up. He probably died in battle, and they used his body to make a super soldier. And so the bad guys turn out, they're set up as the people who had killed his wife, but then it was just, they just kept, the people who made him as a robot just kept reprogramming him, because it was actually the main guy who's played by that other Australian actor, I guess I gotta look it up, who has a robot hand in this film. Oh, robot hands. Guy Pearce. God, he's not even that highly ranked in the actual listing here. So Guy Pearce sets him up to, programs him and uses these like simulations to give him his memory pretty much, so he can just go out and kill all these people one by one per reset that are competitors to Guy Pearce's character. So Guy Pearce is actually the bad guy, and he uses two other characters, one who has the, camera eyes and the robot legs, and a woman who has robotic lungs, to, make sure that he does his job, and then they bring him back, and then they have to fight him, but then she's actually a good guy, and it's just dumb. It's overcomplicated. You don't know when the fuck to start giving a shit, because it's just so messy. I don't care for this film. I don't care for Vin Diesel's character, because, like I said, the first 10 minutes, he seems like Vin Diesel. He's like, yep, he's got the charisma, he's got the babe, he's got the action, the overall, like, I'm really good at my job kind of, so hence, he's such a good soldier kind of deal. But then once they kill him, he's just suddenly a just mindless robot, and it really sucks. So it's not very enjoyable to watch, and trust me, even with the alternate ending availability, which is mostly just a pre-rendered alternate ending that looks like shit, and it's very confusing, because I don't know how the hell they would have edited that into the film. It's just an alternate fight scene, more or less. Anyway, it is not a good film. There is no stakes. They try to make stakes out of having these nanobots overpower, and they glow red when they've overpowered themselves, which is more or less, if he gets shot too many times, they, because they have to keep regenerating him, they will overpower themselves, and then he'll shut down. But then the one time he actually does shut down, because they overpower him, he actually just gets up anyway, because it's as if his superpower has worn off, so now he's just mortal, and then he blows himself up, and the main bad guy up, and Guy Pearce's character up, and you'd think that's, oh no, he's dead, it's the end of the film, but no, this nerd character he made friends with saved him, and now he's back, and he doesn't have to, his power cells won't die off, and now he's practically immortal again. It's a mouthful. It's not worth watching. I'd skip it. Of all these films, I'd skip it. I know my mate Guy says that it's one of his best. I don't think so. I think just out of pure performance, like, the film as it is terribly written and directed and everything. And despite it having a cool premise, it's just a lackluster waste of time. And Vin Diesel just isn't good in it. He's only good in the first 10 minutes when he feels like a Vin Diesel character. And maybe that's why God liked us, it convinced him to like it. I can't speak for him. And you don't even know who he is. But he's just my mate who just has great taste in film and can, doubly perspective, why a film could be good and then bad at the same time. I like that about him. But still, not worth watching this film, in my opinion. So hence the 1 star. And that's it. So let's cut the outro, shall we? I don't know whether Vin Diesel actually takes his life a quarter of a mile, or if he really is the kind of person who cares about family or the dark, survival, I don't know. But nevertheless, he plays some very interesting characters. And despite whether they have similarities or not, he definitely has his... Well, he knows what he's doing, He has his characters that he plays well enough. He's done other films where they're not really for him. They're just maybe paychecks, or, he can express some talent here or there, say with his voice work in The Iron Giant or the Guardians of the Galaxy films. But the real Vin Diesel films are they're just something more, something else. And just as an overall, they're fun to watch, you know. They're the popcorn fodder with something a bit extra in them, a bit extra for the audience. And look, as an overall, I'd say that they're all worth watching, even though I just don't like Bloodshot, for example. It's, you know, it still is in the same vein of films. So, in the end, I think Vin Diesel is an interesting actor. He's not some Oscar-worthy talent, but he is movie-worthy talent. So, nevertheless, if you've enjoyed this video, feel free to like, share, and subscribe for more. What other actors should I review? Should I review more actors with more dynamic range, or more of the kind of movie fodder type actors? We'll see. There's always plenty of actors to review. It takes me some time to make these videos because I've got to come up with a list, find access to all these films, and actually watch and then review them all. But I don't mind. I like the effort because it's interesting to see how an actor can show range, or just how they can appear in films. So yes, there will be a playlist on screen or in the description down below for the rest of my reviewing actors, plus my Fast and Furious franchise review. Outside of that, thank you all so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Adios. I'd turn the car on and start driving now, but I don't actually have a license, nor do I know how to drive, so yeah. Also, my neighbours are like right across the street and kind of staring at me, so that's great. Bye.